ecosystems. Thank you, and we look forward to your active engagement on this initiative, and together we can make a difference for our planet and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Elizabeth, for those very, targeted remarks at delivering the freshwater challenge. I know the Honorable Minister Mike from Zambia had requested to leave immediately after this. So because of we need evidence that this session was held, I want to request our photographer from WWF, Honorable Minister Alice Wahome, Honorable Minister Mike, Madam Elizabeth, Madam Trimizo, if you could be upstanding for a group photo for the opening remarks session. I would also request Madam Alice, water envoy from Netherlands, please just come on stage. We take a group photo for this session. We have another 5 minutes for another segment. Please, if you could come to the stage. Yes, just for the photo. If you could make it quickly, please, kindly.
Look at this gender session. Mr. Mike, only women with
Any other co-representative from coalition partners, IUCN, the Nature Conservancy, if you're here, kindly, we are really short of time. Please. Nature Conservancy, Fred, please. Please tell us when you're done. Thank you. Thank you. So we have only 5 minutes left for this segment. I want to hand over the moderation to Madam Julie from Wetlands International. Thank you so much. Our opening remarks session, government officials, thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon. All protocols observed. I won't take much time. As you hear, we only have 5 minutes. I think my first comment would be to really thank our honorable ministers from Kenya and from Zambia. Indeed, we do have a large target to be able to fulfill. So you're the ones who've taken the bull by the horns, so we thank you for that. And we really look forward to having the other countries join this challenge. The second thing I want to say is that if we really want to reach these targets, one of the things we really have to focus on is restoration of our catchments, because that is how we'll then be able to allow our rivers to regenerate. So we are looking forward to also working with partners to be able to do that, working all the way from the sources to the seas. So we are looking forward to working with each and every one of you. So I will not talk much. I will invite the next group of panelists. So we have Ms. Beatrice Caesar, the Director General for Environment and Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Rwanda. Next, we have Mr. Kibono Jamali, the Climate Change Officer for the Ministry of Water and Environment of Uganda. So really, we've just talked to some of our heads of delegation here, and they've told us from the two countries, that is Zambia and Kenya, what they're going to be doing in terms of their priorities for rivers, wetlands, and peatland restoration. So it would also be good to hear from the three of you. I know you come in with a different hat, but it will be good to hear from three of you what you see the priorities are for your country, what you foresee doing forward in order to reach some of these targets which are within this freshwater challenge. So welcome. I think we have 5 minutes, so maybe we can each take about 2 minutes. Thank you. So we start from this end, ladies first.
Thank you very much. And let me start by 2 points why I'm so excited to be here. And the first point is, look at that group picture. Did you see how many women were on stage here? That would have never happened 15 years ago. I come from a country with a feminist foreign policy, so I'm really excited to be here with the man. but also with so many women. Really good that we see that. Secondly, I'm excited to be here because of the Freshwater Challenge. Tajikistan, the Republic of Tajikistan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands helped to organize the UN Water Conference in March 2023. And I'm being asked all the time, so where's the action? Are things happening? What's happening? Are we just going to conferences? You're showing that the action is ongoing. So we go to conferences, we come together to exchange knowledge, but at the same time, we act. We act at the local level, we act at the basin level, we act at the national level. So a big congratulations to all the countries and the organizations involved in the Freshwater Initiative. Water is how climate change manifests itself. So if you talk about the challenge of climate change and the challenge of climate adaptation, you've heard other speakers talk about it. It's about changing rainfall patterns. It's about floods that you read about in the news, but it's also about droughts, which is much more slow motion, but creates a lot of poverty and hunger. But when we don't talk in terms of challenges, we talk in terms of opportunities, as President Ruto talked this morning. Water is also the motor of climate adaptation. Water is the solution. And I think I specifically want to highlight here the importance of freshwater storage. Right? If a lot of the climate change impact is too much water in the form of floods or too little water in the forms of droughts, actually having a buffer, having water storage is the way to adapt to climate change. We know that 99% of freshwater storage is actually in nature, and we know that freshwater storage is declining. That's true for glaciers, it's true for wetlands, it's also true for man-made reservoirs with sedimentation. So we need to think about how we restore freshwater storage, how we restore freshwater ecosystems. And one thing I really haven't heard about yet here, but I want to mention, is how important groundwater is in this. Groundwater is really our collective buffer to climate change and is our motor of climate adaptation. Let me talk a little bit about my own country, the Netherlands. We're not in Africa, but I think it's a good illustration of how freshwater restoration, freshwater's ecosystem restoration is important. In the Netherlands, we've actually fought water. We fought nature for centuries. Small water storage in urban areas. We're looking at wetland restoration, and it's a complete change of mentality. We call it Room for the River, and most recently our cabinet has adopted a policy which says that water and soil is a guiding principle for all our decisions in spatial planning. You need to take water into account early. Very quickly, why can we do that in the Netherlands? It's because of governance and financing. And I think when we talk about water, when we talk about freshwater ecosystem restoration, let's not only talk about the engineering and the technical and the ecology, but talk about governance and financing. 1% of GDP in the Netherlands is spent on water management or water services in a very rich country. The vast majority of that finance is public, and the vast majority of that finance is spent and raised at subnational level. We have water boards, which is a special layer of government, which actually have the authority to tax. It's earmarked taxation that goes back into water management. And we have strong water utilities that also charge for drinking water. So, water is on the agenda. We need to take it to the COP, put it at the heart of climate action. Water is the motor of climate adaptation. And most important, let's get to action.
Right, so thank you very much. Go ahead.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a French speaker, so I will speak in French in order to give you the opportunity to improve also your French, as we are improving our English. Mesdames et messieurs, moi je voudrais vous parler du lien qu'il y aurait entre les tourbières, donc peatland, et l'eau. nous, République démocratique du Congo, nous avons déjà décidé de pouvoir soutenir cette initiative sur l'eau douce. Parce que, comme vous le savez, notre pays à nous représente 10% d'eau douce en ce qui concerne la superficie ou la quantité mondiale de cette ressource-là. Alors, vous avez aussi appris que la République démocratique du Congo dispose à ce stade, dans la partie cuvette centrale du pays qui avait déjà été cartographiée, de 111 400 km² de tourbières. Mais nous avons aussi des tourbières dans les mangroves, peatland. Et on a aussi des tourbières dans la partie vallée du Rift. Et on a enfin des tourbières dans la partie province du Katanga. Tout cela, mis ensemble, représente une évaluation de stock de carbone de 48 gigatonnes. Alors, pour pouvoir maintenir ce stock de carbone dans le sous-sol et permettre aux tourbières de pouvoir remplir leurs fonctionnalités écologiques, parce que ici nous sommes au Kenya, mais je suis très sûr que si vous êtes en train de respirer en ce moment, c'est parce qu'il y a aussi la tourbière du Congo qui est en train de purifier cet air que vous respirez en ce moment. Alors, comment nous allons faire pour que cette tourbière puisse rester dans l'état de pouvoir remplir sa fonctionnalité écologique? Une seule démarche à mener, c'est protéger l'eau. Parce que si une tourbe est asséchée ou drainée de son eau, et le stock de 48 gigatonnes de carbone dont je venais de vous parler sera relâché dans l'atmosphère, et la République démocratique du Congo sera hissée au rang de pays émetteurs. Alors qu'en ce moment, les tourbières sont là pour pouvoir atténuer le climat mondial. Alors, nous avons donc décidé de pouvoir identifier une politique spécifique de zones humides. On peut parler des zones humides, nous pouvons aussi parler de marécages. Parce que les tourbières sont en réalité cartographiées dans les marécages ou bien dans les zones humides. C'est pour ça que je suis en train de souligner le fait que le lien entre l'eau et les tourbières est très important. Quelle est la politique que nous avons identifiée? Elle se fait d'abord au niveau scientifique. Donc nous invitons les universités, que ce soit l'université de Kinshasa, l'université de Kisangani, tous ceux qui travaillent dans les zones humides, à pouvoir mener des études sur l'eau qui nous disent un peu quelle est la politique gouvernementale qui devra être adoptée. Il y a aussi le suivi communautaire. Nous avons tendance, nous scientifiques, nous décideurs politiques, à pouvoir oublier le poids des communautés locales et les peuples autochtones. Alors que les tourbières sont aussi des zones dans lesquelles les communautés locales et les peuples autochtones produisent leurs moyens de subsistance. L'eau est aussi ces milieux dans lesquels les communautés viennent produire les moyens de subsistance. Et donc, il est important que les communautés arrivent aussi à suivre la qualité de l'eau pour qu'elles soient capables de se dire, bon, cette année, peut-être que le niveau de l'eau va baisser ou le niveau de l'eau va monter et qu'elles sachent comment se comporter. Et enfin, c'est par là que j'ai fini, madame, nous sommes en train de monter une stratégie de tourbières avec un grand pilier qui sera consacré à l'eau, parce que pour que les tourbières puissent continuer à remplir leur fonctionnalité écologique, il est important que nous puissions maîtriser le niveau de l'hydrologie lié à cet écosystème. Voilà un peu les quelques informations que je voulais partager à ce stade. Merci.
Thank you very much. Maybe we allow the third speaker and then we can sum up.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the government of Kenya and Zambia for the invitation. Basically, I will dwell on the achievements, because even though this is a water challenge, but I'm not going to look at the challenges associated with it. I want to look at the opportunities and what we have been able to do as a country. So there are a number of policies and strategies in Liberia that have been put into place to ensure the continuous availability of critical water resources that are very important for domestic, agricultural, energy, and recreational purposes. These policies enable Liberia as a country to be able to mainstream climate change into all water resource management plans and programs to secure environmental safety and sustainable freshwater supply. At the same time, we have been able to design and implement a strategic communication plan to inform and educate the public about climate change and the challenges associated with keeping this water ecosystem intact. Also, as a country, we have been able to conduct water resources vulnerability assessment, mapping, and documentation, so that we can be able to disseminate the necessary critical information about critical water resources that we have in the country. We have also been able to support the protection of water catchment and other sources of fresh water. At the same time, we have been able to, as a country to develop our climate change policy and response strategy that perfectly articulated how the issue of water resources, especially fresh water, can be handled. Effort perspective, as we go above these conversations, we look forward to more engagement, maybe in COP28. Thanks for the invitation. Like I said, thank you.
Okay, give them a better round of applause. I wish we had more time to do this, but we are really tight on time. But it's been very good to hear. I think what we've heard so far is that we need to store our fresh water, restore our ecosystems. We've been challenged to also think about our groundwater. Indeed, I have visited Room for the River, very impressive. So if there are ways we can learn from that, that would be good. We've heard about governance and financing, and of course, peatlands. A lot of people don't talk about peatlands, but peatlands also store a lot of water. So maybe moving forward, that's also an area we need to look at. And of course, Liberia finishing off very well, telling us about your policies, your strategies. What I like is what you mentioned about ensuring that mainstreaming, and of course, including integrated water resource management. So thank you very much. So give them a clap as they move off the stage. I'll now hand over the last session to Madam Alice Rueza. Alice Rueza is a Senior Director, Policy Influence and Engagement, WWF International. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wow. Give them another round of applause. I know it's the end of the day, so it feels a little bit less energy. But I'm only here to do closing remarks, so I'm not going to turn it into a session, I promise. And I think really mostly to thank, first and foremost, our speakers from the first panel and the second panel for really bringing the fresh water and the importance of fresh water to climate change into light. Allow me to restate the rationale that rivers and wetlands are the front lines of the climate and nature crisis. The importance of healthy freshwater ecosystems is recognized in key international development frameworks, including the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the Global Biodiversity Framework, the UNCCD, the Ramsar Convention, and so on and so on. And of course, early this year, I think it was this year, Eric, in March, we had the UN Water. I wanted to make sure I get my water summit. So this has really been the year for water. And to achieve the freshwater ecosystem restoration and conservation at scale by 2030, we have our freshwater challenge that you heard about today, which requires the active support of all sectors involved in water-related activities across the many sectors. The challenge, as you have heard, aims to catalyze, convene, and contribute to targeted interventions, connecting these with your national plans and strategies. And it also aims at increasing the overall investment into restoration and conservation of freshwater ecosystems and substantially increase the social and economic returns on those investments. And by doing so, the freshwater challenge countries will reach their international commitments, as we've just mentioned, on climate, on biodiversity, on disaster risk reduction, and the SDGs. As you've heard, it is a country-led initiative that aims to restore 300,000 kilometers of rivers and 350 million hectares of wetlands and conserve intact freshwater systems. That's ambitious, and it's the right ambition. We need ambition. We had the president today talk about that. It's a mechanism to catalyze, convene, and contribute to interventions, to ensure integration of freshwater targets in global, regional, and national plans, quantify existing global ambitions and account for the contributions of different stakeholders, accelerate implementation. And as we move to COP28, and it was really good to hear the representative from the UAE talk about this as being one of the biggest pillars, the challenge roadmap will entail 3 main services: filling knowledge gaps for action, facilitating coordination and inclusivity, and importantly, mobilizing resources for implementation. Thank you very much once again for attending this event, and we look onwards and upwards to COP28, where we really make the case for fresh water. Thanks again. It's the end of the session. I forgot to say that. Thank you.
Bridging new end-to-end voluntary carbon market integrity to accelerate green growth in Africa. Hosted by the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative, VCMI, the Integrity Council on Voluntary Carbon Markets, ICVCM, and the African Carbon Markets Initiative, ACMI. I am Tarieg Badigeshin, and I am the co-chair of VCMI. It is my pleasure to welcome you and to extend our shared gratitude to our Kenyan hosts for bringing us all together at this inaugural African Climate Summit. Today's events have highlighted the scale of Africa's assets in the renewable energy and climate action dimension. Our potential is unparalleled in all aspects of climate action: energy, infrastructure, finance, nature. We hold the keys to drive green growth, not just in Africa, but to be exported across the world. One of these solutions is an African voluntary carbon market, or what we call the VCM. If deployed correctly, this could become a new kind of financial tool to mitigate climate change and also deploy capital to where it's needed most, bringing positive impacts for both people and planet. Africa's potential to supply high-quality carbon credits is vast. Also vast is Africa's ambition to become a leading market for high-integrity VCMs. The world should welcome this ambition. We welcome this ambition. I welcome this ambition. As without ambition, we won't achieve our goals. For these goals to be realized, people must feel they can trust this market. To build trust, we first must make the principle of integrity rooted firmly as the foundation of African VCMs. Two crucial initiatives in establishing integrity came to market this year. ICVCM brought integrity rules on the supply side for carbon credits. VCMI, the organization I co-chair, brought integrity rules to the buy side of the carbon credits equation. So it's been quite a year for VCMs, but there is still much to do. We are on a journey, and there will be bumps in the road. That's why it's important for us to have open conversations, to listen, to collaborate, as we forge this path to a robust African VCM. Therefore, I'm delighted that VCMI is a technical trust to deliver capital and scale as one crucial tool in the climate fight. So, to begin, I'm honored to introduce Honorable Minister Jinapor, Minister of Lands and Natural Resources of Ghana. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam. Excellencies, African climate experts, policymakers, esteemed government officials, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to use this moment to express my profound gratitude to all those herein gathered, including the Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiative, VCMI, the African Carbon Markets Initiative, ACMI, and the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, ICVCM. Undoubtedly, this side event will leave an indelible mark on all who will have the privilege of participating, both within this room and beyond its confines. Special commendation to our esteemed keynote speakers and experts whose invaluable insights will enrich our discussions on the topic, quote, leveraging new end-to-end voluntary carbon market integrity to accelerate green growth in Africa, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly heartwarming to witness Africa's significant advancement in the global carbon market, which is significantly brought to the fore by His Excellency President Ruto and the Kenyan government in organizing this Africa Climate Summit. Several African nations, such as Kenya, Malawi, Gabon, Nigeria, and Togo, have expressed their commitment to collaborate with the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative to amplify carbon credit production through voluntary carbon market activation plans. Ghana, my own country, is also very interested in engaging actively in the ACMI and looks forward to a concrete engagement plan beyond this summit. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you may be well aware, Ghana has achieved significant milestones in the generation of forest carbon credits, having received its first emission reductions payment from the Carbon Fund of the World Bank. We have also made a bold step to be the first country to define a reasonable framework within which Article 6 of the Paris Agreement framework transaction can be achieved for Ghana and for both voluntary and compliance market engagements. Internationally, Ghana and the United States are co-chairing the new and phenomenal Forest and Climate Leadership Partnership, FCLP, launched at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh as a high-level ministerial partnership to bring together government and non-governmental organizations to work on solutions to reduce forest loss, increase restoration, and support sustainable development to achieve the targets set by the Glasgow Leadership Declaration on halting and reversing forest loss by 2030. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, some initiatives already being worked on by the FCLP are on developing integrated country packages for nature and also strengthening forest carbon markets and their credit generation. The work on the forest carbon market has identified the need to develop coordinated, holistic, and bespoke technical and financial capacity of grassroots level multi-stakeholder governance approaches. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in a prior event this morning at this summit, the FCLP has announced the launch of a working group for this forest carbon market and a call on all relevant stakeholders to join hands to develop this body of work for high integrity forest carbon credits. There's no 1.5 without nature and forests, and getting the market to function right for forests is a huge success factor. As a country, our engagement with the VCMI in particular in developing the asset strategy and claims code have proven that the voluntary carbon markets, which were hitherto seen to be very volatile, unstable, and difficult to track, can be strengthened with the right tools and capacity to provide a financial ramp-up for climate action as the private sector and corporate boost needed for the voluntary carbon markets to work cannot be overemphasized. Ultimately, what is useful to Africa and other developing countries is the recognition of the efforts needed for sustainable development and the payment of the right price for carbon. Ghana believes the price will be case specific. However, it is nothing around $5 or $10, but very much within $20 and $35, depending on national circumstances and the level of expertise and capacity to generate high integrity. This notwithstanding, we appreciate the incremental growth of the market, and in particular, the growth of developing countries to ensure that they have the right carbon market infrastructure. In this sense, Ghana believes the ICVCM in the development and application of its core carbon principles should widen their net of engagement with developing countries to understand the peculiar national circumstances, appreciate growth and progress, political will and stability, and the need to create room for stepwise improvements. Principles that do not support the growth of the carbon market will not be helpful to climate action. We must all appreciate that we don't have much time to delay the urgency needed for climate action. Therefore, the development of any principles, strategies, codes, or others must be beneficial to provide support and not just disqualify the progress any country has made. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, much will be discussed by able panelists, and I wish to re-echo this. The true potential of our collective efforts emerges when we acknowledge the sacrifices countries from both the South and North are making towards climate action. The demand side is only meaningful when, for instance, the supply side is supported to function fully, and this understanding will be crucial in defining evolving interlinkages between the voluntary carbon market and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I will leave you with the Latin phrase, quote, "Capiemus omnem occasionem," end quote, who charges us to seize every opportunity and platform to implement strategic actions that will usher in an era of sustainable growth that leaves no country behind. Let us continue these discussions and collaborations beyond this panel, working together to create a better Africa and a better world for ourselves and generations to come. I thank you all for your upcoming engagement and participation, which obviously promises to be exciting and fruitful. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for those really cogent insights. We're really grateful to Ghana for the leadership in these.
We want to build on just the content that was highlighted by the Minister, because I think it's critical to make sure that as we're looking at the carbon markets, we're looking at an ecosystem. So without question, we've seen a lot of energy and activity in the VCM space, but we need to make sure there's appropriate also analysis around the Article 6 and compliance space to make sure that engagements and capacity building is cutting across that spectrum. And very much true to that, the ACME is rolling out what we call carbon market activation plans at a jurisdiction to jurisdiction level, which really focuses on bringing together public and private sector stakeholders at a national level to better understand the needs and outlook in their environment, to therefore inform the appropriate policy and regulatory frameworks that create a conducive environment for business to occur. I think we really do appreciate the work we did in Kenya, particularly with USAID, in building what we call a blueprint, which gives a clear roadmap to the moving parts of what should be involved when you're doing a carbon market activation rollout. I think as we really move forward in building those high integrity, high quality markets, I think it becomes even more critical for us to build an appropriate depth of monitoring and evaluation capacity on the continent, so that as standards are necessarily getting stronger, we do have an appropriate pool of capacity on continent to really effectively analyze and verify and apply appropriate methodologies to the realities we're seeing on the continent. So we can really transition from a situation where there's a feeling of a cutting and pasting what's been applied in more developed markets, trying to apply it to our realities here.
Common solutions. The other thing that is being planned is a serious, robust engagement with indigenous assessment framework. So for me, I think for Africa, there's a huge opportunity for high integrity to accelerate the flow of funding, which is desperately needed in Africa. And then voluntary carbon markets will also make a range of essential climate projects visible and viable. And of course, 90% of potential nature-based solutions are situated on the global south. And by linking protection of natural ecosystems to economic value, the voluntary carbon markets offer a powerful tool for leveraging private sector investment in the protection and sustainable management of forests, wetlands, and other critical carbon sinks. So allow me to stop there, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, and it's definitely worth a read, checking out the core carbon principles, very fundamental into the supply side carbon credits quality and design. So yes, we've seen some really good examples of leadership that's been mentioned and indicated by our prior speakers. But ultimately, if African nations are going to achieve their goals, meet their NDCs, it has to be a multi-stakeholder effort. The concept that there can't be a one-size-fits-all approach is very important. So I'd like to bring in Margaret Kim, CEO of Gold Standard. You have quite a bit of experience with this. And so could you speak to how governments, the standards bodies, private sector, and the various multi-stakeholder initiatives can work together, especially in this delivery of integrity for VCMs and with a focus on Africa?
Thank you, Tari. I think you asked me a $1 trillion question. If we can have a perfect answer to that, we won't be sitting here discussing the matter at hand. based on our 20 years of experience, I think Gold Standard has been in a place where we worked with different governments, private sector, especially the project developers and local communities and local NGOs and civil societies. And as a standard body, the market's been evolving tremendously, as most of you in this room probably have been following very closely. So I think the previous panelists talked about critical elements to it, but I do want to reiterate the point, Taria, you mentioned earlier and the minister mentioned earlier, is the balance of supply and demand, because we often get really caught up in thinking about integrity, providing a supportive regulatory framework, and we often think about the demand side sort of naturally following. So I think in order for Africa to harness a scalable, successful carbon market, it really has to look at it from an end to end, so from supply to demand. And I do want to think about the 3 C's. So first, clarity. I think it's really important that the leaders of this region communicate and manage expectation. And the private sector is not looking for bulletproof, perfect answer, but how is it progressing? How is it going to be presented? When is it going to roll out? What's the sunset period? What's the grace period? I think these simple things you need to communicate and also hear from the private sector what their expectations are. I think that's a really important component we often get lost in doing our own daily work. And second is clarity on what that regulatory framework means, because as many of you who have been in carbon markets understand, there are a lot of contractual commitments that fall under these processes, and often they go for years. So if the government comes in and there's a regulatory framework being introduced to create about farming practices in Africa, what do you know about transport systems in Africa, in the rural regions of Africa? We don't, but you do. So what we do is we work with local communities to build these methodologies, and we've been doing that for years. Of course, it's not at a scale, because we are also small standard in the corner of, I guess, Geneva. But we welcome project developers and local communities to submit your methodologies to us so that we can work with experts in the communities in those topics so that we can develop those methodologies and MRV that's taking into consideration the local context. So I think it's really important that we bring in communities, because a lot of people say, oh, voluntary carbon market is the next new thing in Africa. It's not. Our oldest project developers are from Africa. We have our oldest NGOs developing projects from Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, you name it, in all parts of the region. So it's not that it's new. It's been there. We just need to understand how we build that, how we scale that. So it brings to my 3rd C is capacity. And I know a lot of us talk about capacity in all kinds of ways, but I think there's a critical role that government can play and standards can play and project developers and private sector can play, is how do we build capacity from our own experience? So for example, the local MRV capacity is probably the most urgent capacity we need in the region. So just simply put, we're paying a lot of money as a projects come through Gold Standard. The projects have to pay a lot of expensive international consultants. I'm sure they offer excellent work, but what about we think about building that capacity here? Understanding the local context. So how do we do that? And that's not going to happen tomorrow or by COP. That's going to take years and different political regimes or different political parties. And that's something that has to be sustainable in coming years. So we need to look at educational systems. Some of the universities offer market-based mechanism courses and concentrations in majors already. So can Africa show that leadership in transforming that educational system? and also build that pool of experts who can be deployed for the MRV. And I always tell the governments we meet is that that skill set can be transferable to other climate finance. Of course, not completely, but those skill sets, the MRV skill sets, are critical in delivering any climate finance. So it's not just about voluntary carbon market, but it will apply to Article 6. It will apply to different sustainable finance mechanisms. So I think it's really important for us to understand that if wherever you sit, whether it's from the government, standard body, or private sector, whether you're a project developer or a consulting firm or an intermediary or a buyer, where can you contribute towards those providing clarity, capacity, and for the communities? I think those are the three things I take away from the discussions I have. And lastly, before I stop, I really want to highlight one thing. A lot of people approach me with carbon credit as a commodity. And while I understand that we do need to scale the market, it's not like the other commodities we've seen in the market. It's about people and their stories of change behind every single carbon credit. And that's something that that previous speaker talked about, is the SDGs. So sometimes I think about maybe carbon credit is a co-benefit in improving livelihood in communities, sending our children to school instead of fetching wood or water, bringing clean access to energy, clean energy and clean water is really what these projects are about. And I really want us to think about that as we all gather to think about how to scale the market and build that confidence behind this market. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we're better than Africa. I think the African carbon credits will have the maximum co-benefit quotient, if you will, given all the sustainability drivers as well. So I think it's a really good segue to go into those who are actually doing this work on the ground and working with organizations such as yourself. And I want to go to Sophie Odupoy, who's the group head of public affairs at Cocoa Networks, which has had some very positive experience with channeling carbon credits into their business model. And so Sophie, can you speak about Cocoa's focus and your experience with carbon credits from an integrity standpoint with your work?
Thank you, Terry. First of all, we are registered with Gold Standard, so I think it's a very good start. Cocoa Networks, so we've built the world's first scalable bioethanol fuel utility. We actually offer low-income households two-burner cooker that uses bioethanol. Now, what is the game changer for us is the fact that we use technology. So we've intertwined technology and carbon markets into our business model. So we are actually able to, we enable households to transition from use of charcoal and firewood. We've been in this market since 2014. We developed a solution here. We launched in 2019. 2 weeks ago, we hit 1 million households in Kenya across 10 urban cities. So we are truly scalable. Now, what is different in terms of our carbon credits? As was pointed out, first is the fact that we are changing lives. Yeah? We are giving a clean solution, replacing charcoal and firewood, so people are actually cooking indoors. It no longer smokes. The carbon credits we generate, they're traceable. Yeah, because we use technology. Right now, I can actually highlight for you where a customer, how frequently they've been buying, how much they've been buying. So in addition to us knowing where they're located, those numbers are actually backed with people. They're actually people, they're not just numbers. When we're saying it's 1 million households, we're able to show you where they're located, where they're buying, how frequently they're buying, how much they're spending, because we have all that data. You're able to actually come and see that data, and that is what sets us apart. The fact that you'll come into our network operating center, the canister that a customer takes home has an NFC chip. So we're not tracking the cooker. We are tracking their buying. The NFC chip is linked to their mobile number, and they're able to load their account using their mobile number. So they have a mobile wallet. So, and then they come and buy the fuel at an ATM. And the ATMs are located in shops close to where they are. So when they come with the canister and dock it at the cocoa point, immediately a message is sent to the cloud, and we are able to identify, hello, Taria. Yeah? So for us, it's not just a number. It is an actual person. Yeah? And I think that is what has truly enabled us when we are going and engaging with carbon buyers, the fact that we are not just talking about giving people or selling cook stoves and then forgetting about it. We are able to, and then we interact with our customers. They're able to actually call us if they have problems. So for us, it is an ongoing relationship. As SDGs were mentioned for us, yeah, we touch about 7 different SDGs. If you think about majority of the agents, the people who actually run the businesses where these ATMs are located, majority of these agents are female-owned. Yeah, so we are talking about we are empowering women. Then our fuel, when you buy, when you cook with it, it is as easy as any of us here cooking with gas. We've enabled that experience to come into the households of people who would otherwise not be able to have that experience. So we free up their time. They're actually able to focus on other activities. If you think about a lot of, if it's charcoal or if it's firewood collection, you're actually taking time out for you to actually go and collect the firewood or even buy the charcoal, and then you come in and take time to light the charcoal. Now we've reduced the time, because for us it's as simple as switching on, light it, when you're done, switch it off. Yeah. So we touch quite a number of SDGs. And then thirdly is about transparency. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk about the fact that there is a lot of the transactions are opaque. As Cocoa as a business, and we have engaged repeatedly with the government where they ask us, where does the money go? Yeah, we are able to show where our carbon revenue goes, because we pass majority of our carbon revenue to our households. That is how we are able to subsidize the price of the cooker and subsidize the price of the ethanol. And we have made a commitment in our conversations with government of Kenya, government of Rwanda, and with other governments, that as the price of carbon credits goes up, we will pass more and more. Because the further out you go out of the urban areas, the lower the income levels, and the more you need to bring the levels down. So for us, we've made the commitment. That transparency on top of the fact that we have traceability of our carbon credits is what sets us apart. Thank you, Taria.
Thank you, Sophie. And I think your points about technology and people is a very keen insight for me, because the link between finance, credits, markets, technology, people, and what carbon credits mean in that space is so crucial. But let's take a corporate perspective now, because ultimately this is critical to ensuring capital will flow to high integrity projects. And we have Valentine from Safaricom, one of East Africa's most impactful. Valentine isn't here? Okay, all right, no problem at all. So let's go to Pauline. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Delighted to have you, another developer that is doing a lot of great work in East Africa. Capacity building has been mentioned clearly as one of the most important aspects of supply of credits to Africa. We know this from our own work at VCMI, given the toolkit we've just launched. So Pauline Nantongo, Executive Director of EcoTrust. Pauline, lack of guidance is often discussed as one of the largest barricades to VCM for African economies. What are the key steps that are needed to be in place to ensure capacity building and equitable access of VCMs?
Thank you very much. As a project developer intermediary that has been managing a project for 17 years, a project that has existed for 20 years, my take is that the first thing that we need to do is to change the narrative. Move away from this market-centric technical rigor that considers communities as passive. Have you consulted them? Have they consented? What benefits are you sharing with them? To a more holistic narrative that puts the communities at the center of development and also at the center of the financial returns. A narrative that recognizes that it's possible to deliver real, additional, and verifiable benefits through community-led processes that deliver long-term livelihood benefits as well as environmental benefits. Now, the other thing that we need to do is to recognize that a carbon scheme has an investment model has a business model and it has an implementation model. Most of the times we focus on the implementation. But the thing is that if you have worked out an investment model that, for example, allows multinationals to lay claim over large tracts of land and the carbon benefits arising from it, you will never be able to have high integrity at implementation because you've already given up your rights at the investment stage. And the level of community engagement that is desired determines the integrity of all these other things. The project that I manage subscribes to the Plan Vivo standard. Under the Plan Vivo standard, the activities or interventions must be designed by the communities. We as project developers, we only come in to technically specify those activities. And the land, the carbon rights, the trees and everything must belong to the communities. And 60% of the income must go as cash transfers to the pockets of the smallholder farmers. So what this has done is that it has fostered investment models that consider communities as co-investors. And you had better have a value proposition in your business plan because you'll not give up their land to something that does not give value proposition to them. And also the engagement model must be based on a common vision. Otherwise, they will not be party with you, and therefore you will not have any credits delivered. So the capacity that is required is one where the science is easy. Trust me, the science is a lot easier. The whatever allometric equations are standard, the wood density is standard, and all these other things, they can even be automated because we can actually leverage on digital transformation to automate all those things. The real areas where we need the guidance are those areas of how do you arrive at a common vision with those communities? How do you get them to be co-investors? They retain their land, they remain their trees, and all these safeguards will not even be required because it's them that is investing. All that you are doing is to make sure they access the market. The system we use is a cooperative offsetting scheme. You have your land, you put your credits in there, we sell, the money comes, and it comes back to you. So it is possible to have all those high quality credits generated. But we need to standardize all these things, build capacity to take advantage of the digital transformation, and focus on the capacity building on what is a high integrity investment model, what is a high integrity business model, and what is a high integrity community engagement model or implementation model. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we've had a really incredible speaker group here today, really spanning the breadth of the ecosystem and only underscoring how important it is for the entire ecosystem to collaborate, to really emphasize, and we can only continue to emphasize this arena of end-to-end integrity and the role of transparency, engaging with communities. This collaborative approach is really going to be how African VCMs can stand effectively as the example to the world as to how to deliver this type of capital to scale. So thank you again to the panelists. Thank you for everyone for being here today. I mean, the insights from the panelists on the activities, the imperatives, next steps to build the market have been very useful. We've heard today that establishing a foundation of integrity, transparency, and trust will be the key to unlock scale. And for this integrity to be rooted not only on the supply side, which is critical in terms of engaging with communities, in terms of using technology, but again, on the demand side, it is also very important that we're not having greenwashing on the buyer side and that the buyers are not continuing business as usual emissions. So that handshake globally is going to be very crucial to ensure that this market can truly stand up. Now, rapid action is imperative as African countries are continuing to face the effects of climate change, but carbon credits do present an important tool. So the role of government in establishing an enabled environment, working with the access strategies toolkit that we've brought. I think this ACMI work on the carbon credit activations is going to be fantastic for the market. So let's all get to work. So now it's time to implement. Let's remember integrity is crucial. There's been a lot of talk about price. For the African pricing to rise to the levels we want it, integrity is fundamental to that. Not only is integrity fundamental in terms of business as usual aspects and quality, but SDGs. The more these credits have SDGs and other benefits and co-benefits, the more we should be able to charge so that we actually have high value for the type of impact that we're making. So let's also be focused on that, because I can see many developers and policymakers in the room. Ultimately, this has been a really rich discussion. I can imagine we've only scratched the surface. I know many people here have loads of questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but there are many more carbon credit events during the course of the summit. Let's keep connecting. Let's keep the conversation flowing. I encourage all of you to capitalize on what's happening here in Nairobi, connecting, collaborating, accelerating progress to unlock this vibrant, high integrity, high impact African BCM, which is going to deliver for people and for planet. Thank you very much again.
Opportunity for investment in infrastructure across the continent. What we have seen is that I think there are two specific things that we would like to deal with and address. The first one has to do with really minimizing the failure rate of these projects in terms of being able to move them quickly to feasibility, and then secondly, to reduce the time that it takes for these projects to move towards bankability. And what we've seen is that there is a need to actually have very deliberate instruments that address that specific aspect of project preparation. And we have two that we are using currently, which is the service delivery mechanism. The service delivery mechanism, which basically is working with our various member states and project owners to support them in the process of actually preparing the projects and accessing project financing. The second one is the PDAC quality label, which is looking at how to certify the excellence in project preparation to make sure that when the projects go out to look for financing, that the financiers can be assured that all the relevant checks and balances and rigorous due diligence has been done such that those projects can indeed be funded. Having said that, I think what we're also seeing more and more, and especially as we start to look at the innovative sources of financing, whether we're talking about the climate financing, the green bonds, etc., is that there is a need to do a very deliberate matching of the projects to the different kinds of funds and financiers that are out there. We recognize, I think, that there are some capacity challenges in terms of the ability of member states perhaps to be able to access climate financing.
Projects, sometimes even cross-boundary projects. Now, I gave examples of smaller private sector, sometimes social investments. How do we get investors to listen?
think the way that we have looked at this is that, we obviously understand the fact that when we start talking about regional integration, we have to talk about those big projects. But at the same time, I think when we start to follow an approach, which we are calling the integrated corridor approach, it's calling on us to look at the 4 sectors, so ICT, water, transport, and energy, in a very integrating and integrative manner. But it is also calling on us to look at the linkages between that cross-border infrastructure and the national infrastructure, as well as the services that that infrastructure delivers. So there has to be very clear linkages of that infrastructure to health, to education, to trade, and to making sure that we're able to use that infrastructure to actually provide the opportunities for MSMEs and the smaller projects at a national level. So I think there has to be that linkage and that very deliberate way of how we link national infrastructure to regional and cross-border investments as well.
Thank you so much. I think that actually brings us right to Ms. Fatima. First, congratulations on your AAA rating. I'd like to know from your perspective, in preserving your AAA rating, does that prevent you from attending to innovative projects like the ones I gave examples of? How do you balance maintaining your AAA rating and venturing into newer, innovative, a little riskier projects?
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and thank you for the Kenyan government, our host, and the organizers from UNFCCC and the Africa Climate Summit and the distinguished panel. So, if I may, I think having a AAA rating was not a casual result. It was actually a strive that the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa has really strived for. If I may start by reiterating the fact that we all agree on the greatest channel facing Africa in accessing climate finance is the fact that the climate challenges emerge at a time where the continent is already burdened with heavy debt, which gives a very little room to the public sector borrowing. And that actually demands a different type of instruments, a different type of financial institution to serve a new contract between the continent and the climate finance. And I think with that, we had to evolve as a bank. We've been working with our 18-member Arab League countries that are actually our shareholders for the last 48 years in the continent in financing development projects. But with Africa taking up the commitment towards sustainability, towards financing the SDGs, the demand has grown tremendously. And automatically we had to grow. And I think the AAA rating gives a leverage to the continent in accessing a better financial instruments from the global market. When you are a AAA rated institution, you have better access to leverage, to have a better borrowing prices. And that actually works against the prevailing risk of the continent, but also the perceived risk. If you have institutions that are operating in the continent and they are able to lend to African countries, whether public or private, and we have also a large trade portfolio. My colleagues in the earlier panel are actually good partners in our different financing. I think we have a better chance for ensuring that they have access to new innovative instruments. We've opened up for all different types of innovation as BADIA. We have worked through across the stream of under our BADIA 2030 strategy, which put climate focus as a center of it because it's an SDG focus and you can't do anything about SDGs if you just neglect sustainability. Or we are working on a new initiative where we're looking at different options of blending finance to ensure the continent has not only, I would say, good price finance, but also a finance that speaks to the demand, that is relevant to a new climate contract that we invite you to join us for all the development institutions. And I'll stop here. I think you have also the FDP here to speak better. Our sister institution.
Thank you so much. I think that's actually quite inspirational. and opening yourself up for partnerships as well, and we'll circle back. What level of deal preparation do you expect from project originators and project owners? And do you have space to co-create with others, such as Badia or AFDB? What opportunities do they exist?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you to the organizers and to the African Union. It's inspiring to have us all together. Very good question. You know, I think the context of being a large investor, we also need to talk about being a private investor and answer the question in that context. So let me give the short answers. Yes, we have the ability to co-create. Our fund that is investing in emerging markets and specifically in Africa, we do have a mandate to take on some development capital risk as long as we see line of sight to putting in that larger equity check. So we are an investor that can take some risk early on and also kind of have an extended hold period. In terms of the level of preparation, we, like many others, we operate this capital, make this capital available through funds. And most of the fund structures in market are close-end funds. So they have an investment period of, say, 5 years. They have a realization period of, say, 5 to 7 years. So what ends up being a constraint to the first comments that we heard is actually the time. And so I do like to push back on the notion that they're not investable projects. I have a lot of respect for the developers, the people that work with the developers that are trying to bring these concepts through to fruition. And a lot of these concepts, even at early stage, they are the right thing. And even the mechanics of how they come together could be the right thing. But the time that it takes and then the capital that it takes to get there, it ends up being a constraint. And so because we have a closed-end fund, we have to select those transactions, those development partners, and the ecosystems within they work to make sure that those projects could actually move in the cycle and we could end up putting in the equity check, et cetera. So that's really the constraint. So what we're looking for is we can come pretty early, but when we come early, we would like that to be in a sort of an enabling environment in an ecosystem that you can move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, that engagement with government, there's a clear sort of sequencing, et cetera. And project development often doesn't work that way. It's not linear. It's if you were to draw it out on a map, it would look like spaghetti or a spider web, right? So it's hard to do that. We do look for line of sight or really locked in land if it's going to be for a larger scale project. If it's going to be for a smaller scale project, as you were mentioning, we'd like to really understand early on what that offtake looks like. Is it contractual? Is it exposed to uptake or what we call merchant risk? So we do look for those items, and then we look for the capacity within the team as well. Just because, as I mentioned, it's not linear, and so where there could be a team that has done a lot of work on the ground, done a lot of engagement with the government, maybe has started on some feasibility studies, and then have run short of capital. Have they looked to partner with another developer, and can we augment that, for example? So those are all areas. Let me stop there because I know you have other questions.
Thanks, Ron. So we've been compiling this compendium of projects, as I mentioned earlier, and we found that most countries revert back to NDCs. Is that something that large investors actually look at? Do you consider what countries have put together for submission to UNFCCC, or you're looking elsewhere?
We do look at both. I mean, one of the things where we see value is in bilateral conversations. They tend to produce some interesting results when you can move on. The compendium, as you mentioned, where that can have some positive side is just the engagement with government and the engagement with, organizations that do help with the preparation facility. So there could be a bit of cover in those type of projects, and especially give you some scale. So we don't shy away from that at all. I think the true answer to what you asked is both. Right? We'll look at small scale developers who are trying to develop something scalable over time, and we'll look at kind of government backed or government partnered development projects.
Great, thanks. And coming over to you, Solomon, project preparation facilities are still very small in the continent and very disconnected from follow-on funding and de-risking mechanisms. In fact, project finance volumes in low and middle income countries have dropped from 91 billion in 2019 to less than 60 billion in 2022. Now, I know that you've been heavily involved in financing climate action projects. When you look across the continent and you consider
the much discussed infrastructure funding gap, even at project facilitation stages, what do you think needs to be done strategically to create investment opportunities, especially for local private capital providers?
Okay, thank you very much, Bogolo. As you know, I'm very passionate about domestic capital markets development in Africa. I've heard the estimate of $1 trillion of assets under management. We estimate that between African sovereign wealth funds, African pension funds, African life insurance investment pools, and also the collective investment vehicles across Africa, we actually have $2.3 trillion under management. However, as was said earlier, most of this is invested in government treasuries and also government bonds. So for us, both in terms of ensuring that, the balance between risk perceived and reality is bridged, supporting really the creation of risk asset classes for this set of African institutional investors is absolutely key. Now, what are some of the things that we're actually doing systematically and strategically to create this risk assets? When you take a look at infrastructure development in Africa, you've got to look at the whole spectrum of the financing cycle, from project development, early equity investment, then investment really to bring the projects to financial close, and then bringing in the institutional capital that doesn't want to take construction risk or doesn't really want to take any risk on stability of cash flows.
So the institutional investors we're talking about in Africa are really on the extreme right end. However, the biggest problem is the dearth of bankable projects. So one of the first things we've done is we've created Africa 50, the premier project development facility, infrastructure project development facility in Africa. We've mobilized over $1 billion in 31 countries, from 31 governments and also 2 central banks and ourselves to really kickstart Africa 50. What they're supposed
states in adopting extended producer responsibility, and I will not go so much into the depth of what is extended producer responsibility because we have very good organizations, the producer responsibility organizations, that I will give the floor in the interest of time to tell you what is EPR, what is PRO, what have we been doing, and how does that inspire Africa to adopt this new trajectory towards driving a green economy. So I want to invite Joyce Gashugi, the country manager for, is it the president? Oh, the CEO. She stopped being a country manager. The chief executive officer for Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, and also want to invite, James, are you here? Yes. From Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, and I'd like you to applaud them as they come up. These two have created a very unique piloting of what EPR would look like in a country like Kenya with all our circumstantial, systematic challenges, but they have braced it and they have braced the trail. So without wasting a lot of time, I'll invite Joyce and followed by Kepre. Why Joyce? She started the journey, so you're welcome. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Faith. So, in the interest of time, I will not take up a lot of your time. I just want to say thank you for attending this session. And I think I want to take it by way of a story, take you through our journey, what it has been like, where we started, why we started where we started, and where we are today. And so today, my story is actually the EPR journey from PETCO to PACPRO, how we've implemented extended producer responsibility in Kenya. So a little bit about myself. My background is in environmental science, with about 17 years of experience in the sustainability management space, working for both public and private sector, energy sector, waste management, carbon asset development, trade, as well as the packaging sector. So you can see that at the Africa Climate Summit, I'm right at home. I am a member of the International Solid Waste Association and, of course, a lead expert with NEMA. And currently, of course, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Packaging Producer Responsibility. So I want to take you through the journey of PETCO. Why did we start PETCO? Why did we start EPR in Kenya? So what was the catalyst? In 2017, the Kenya government, through the National Environmental Management Authority, banned plastic flat bags. And in that breath, when they banned the bags, the next most visible pollutant, as you would have it, were the PET bottles. And so, of course, at the time, there had been significant investment by manufacturers, brand owners, into production lines. But also, we are living in a consumer-based society. Everyone wants to consume their product on the go, which means the demand for PET packaging is very high, similar to what you have for other plastics. So at the time, the catalyst to start EPR was actually the regulatory environment. It was hostile. There was a lot of pressure to ban PET plastic bottles. And so it precipitated a need by manufacturers and brand owners to come up with something, a solution. At the time, we had companies come together, and I call them the coalition of the willing, okay? And these are the companies that actually started PETCO. PETCO is a model that was started in South Africa. Now it's nearly 20 years old in South Africa, but then of course Kenya adopted it for 5 years, and then we took it to Ethiopia and now Tanzania. The model is one where we take funds from manufacturers and brand owners, or producers as you would have them, and directly put them into the hands of waste collectors, okay? And it's through this coalition of the willing that we were able to put money into the PET, post-consumer PET recovery. At the time when we started in 2018, we signed a framework of cooperation with the government, but then we also had partners. And our partners, KEPSA, the Kenya Alliance of Residents Association, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Denmark, which is really the embassy of Denmark here in Kenya, and of course P4G, actually gave us a grant of about $100,000 at the time to be able to demonstrate that this model can actually work. But more importantly, that we're actually able to engage with consumers at their level to be able to ensure that they are able to return their packaging. And through those programs, we've been able to put in place waste collection infrastructure And so we have drop-off bins. Today, if you walk around the malls, shopping malls, or one of our most successful programs, together with KEPSA and the P4G, is actually a program we did with one of the second largest housing development in sub-Saharan Africa, the Nyayo Estate Embakasi. And that program, with houses of about 2,500 homes, which means houses over 10,000 people, we've been able to have segregation at source kicking off. It's been going on for the last 3 years very successfully. They started with PET packaging, but now it's scaled to other packaging. And so with these partners, we've been able to realize that together we can be able to demonstrate that the collective is actually quite powerful. So what has our impact been over that period of time? To date, we've actually been able to recycle over 33,000. I know the slide says 25, but we've done 33,161 metric tons, which is over 1.5 billion PET bottles, which means we've actually transferred over 180 million Kenya shillings, well over $1.2 million into the hands of waste collectors. So whenever we are talking about bottom-up, we always say EPR is actually able to create bottom-up very successfully. We've also been able to create buyback centers, over 2,000 waste entrepreneurs in our network, and then of course collector trainings, response to protected areas. PET packaging was banned in protected areas, and we were able to actually ensure that we've put bins to allow for people to return their packaging. Then of course we've spread our reach, but more importantly, we've been able to be front and center in the legislative development process. So together with KEPSA, the Ministry of Environment, we have participated in the development of the Sustainable Waste Management Act and the draft Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations. So in conclusion, what is the reality check? Why do we need to have EPR? So from where I sit, EPR actually has the potential to change and reshape really the future of waste management in Africa. While EPR is actually not a waste management solution, it's actually a resource management approach. The reality is that we are able to monetize the system, which to date lacks funds. A lot of our governments, both national or devolved, they don't prioritize waste management as they should. And even if they were, we have competing interests: health, water, education, etc. And so with government today, where we started was purely voluntary. We had a coalition of the willing. Today in Kenya, it's now mandatory. All producers, manufacturers, brand owners must actually belong to a scheme like ours. Today we are two in the packaging sector, but the pros of having it mandatory as opposed to voluntary is, one, we are able to identify the joyriders. We are able to see who is not taking care of their fair share of post-consumer packaging and be able to hold them accountable to do what they need to do. But then, of course, there's the reality of what is the expectation versus the mandate. As I've said, a lot of governments are looking at EPR as a be-all and end-all solution to waste management, and it really isn't. Everybody in the value chain, from the consumer to government to businesses, have a role to play. So today, the expectation is that EPR will come in and ensure that waste disappears, but the reality is the mandate is just to ensure that post-consumer product or packaging is actually being recovered and being treated. That won't take care of bad consumer habits. And so the reality is we need to be able to ensure everyone takes care of it. And then, of course, the financing costs, which of course would be taken care of by all manufacturers. So in closing, allow me to finish with this, which then shows you why we moved from Petco to PakPro. Thank you. Big picture.
Let's clap for Joyce. I think there's no better way to tell the story than from the ban to looking for a solution, to the new plastics economy, to to Petco, and to PACPRO. So the next story is the story of KEPRO. And the story of KEPRO comes from within the 2018 period, producers had to sit and actually make a commitment. You can't implement EPR if producers are not committed. And if you don't get them willingly to commit, then you are also not making it. So the producers made a commitment through what you call the Kenya Plastics Action Plan. And through the Kenya Plastics Action Plan, the conclusion was Kenya's producers, especially in the plastic space, were going to adopt EPR as a model of managing plastics. And then that created the foundation for KEPRO. So today we have Mr. CEO, let me call him like that, going to tell us the story of KEPRO in 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
So good evening. I almost said good night because it's a bit it's a bit dark. Anyway, even as I want to pull my presentation up, Faith says we have to limit it to 5 minutes. So I'd not want to go into the nitty-gritties of how you are formed. I think Faith has given us a bit of an overview. And essentially, the business model in terms of PROs is similar to what Joyce had taken us through. But my presentation would primarily focus on more of a call to action to us. So how many of us have read the book Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe? Yes. So good. The book was published in 1958. And within the book, Chinua sort of documents, as if empathizing with the forthcoming generation, on the devastating effects of climate change. Worryingly, it seems like we never listened to his teachings. And the devastating effects now resulted to us having the first World Environment Day. Just a quick question. When was the first World Environment Day? When was the first World Environment Day? Okay, because I have 5 minutes, I'll give you the answer. That was in 1973. So 50 years down the line, and maybe just for the benefit of clarity, what was the theme of the event for that year? We can't remember. So I might have not been born, but the idea is the drafters of our future really focused on understanding the schematics of what was going on during that time. And the theme of that conversation was One World, right? Now the problem is we seemingly are very slow to responding to what is actually ailing us as a community, and of course as a general humanity in the space we are in. And that is where the conversation on EPR started. We are used to yardsticks where we ban plastic packaging, as Joyce and Faith had mentioned, and then that's when we realize, oh, we actually need to do something. But the reality, and even from the presentation earlier today, was that we are coming from a stage of global warming to global boiling. So that is why the EPR should not be seen as a yardstick, but as a platform that brings together people to have a conversation on what we can do to actually reverse the devastating effects of our actions as far as the environment is concerned. So in terms of our theory of change, even as I try to scan through our presentation, in terms of about KEPRO, we started operations in 2021. Of course, as a build-up to the conversation from the Kenya Plastic Action. The idea was to bring together producers to be able to respond to post-consumer waste and manage their wastes, or rather the waste resulting from their products. In terms of our niche and our strengths, we pride ourselves in leveraging on our partnerships. Of course, the other idea is, and it boils down to our theory of change, demystifying the narrative on waste. I think for the longest time, we've always believed that waste is actually, or rather we've sort of treated those people who handle waste as lesser persons. But the idea for us is change the narrative. We spent a lot of money through the APR model just to be able to change the narrative in terms of driving behavior change. And of course, building a newer generation of entrepreneurs. Joyce calls them wastepreneurs. So we're empowering communities to be able to see opportunities and improve their lives through waste. Yes, Faith is on my case. It's supposed to be an elevator pitch. So that's our history. In terms of our core values, we pride ourselves in collaboration, as I've said. Our true north is circularity. And of course, we are committed to improving our communities first through behavior change and of course, through realization of circularity. So in terms of board structure, it's similar to all other PROs. Yes. So that is, Faith is on my case. So let me just stop it at this point. I know time is really gone, so thank you very much. I think we are available for a conversation after this in case you'd have any inquiries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for actually this evening we are learning about just the journey for implementing EPR in Kenya. So I'm sure the story is coming in together. Before 2018, after 2018, KEPRO is alive. So now what is happening within this space? I'll allow James and Joyce to take a photo. You can take a photo. Camila, you can join James, and the rest of my panelists can join Joyce as you take that photo, then you come up as I call you up. So we have Dr. Ayub Macharia from NEMA. Please come up. We have Camila, our strategic sector councillor from the Royal Danish Embassy. Come up. We have, is it Rune? Rune, I hope I said it right, like a Danish. Welcome from Seabrain. We have Jackson Kiplagat. Is he here from WWF? Jackson, are you here? Okay, Jackson is not here. Then we have Mr. Kainika from the Kenya Association of Waste Recyclers. He has braced a lot on behalf of the recyclers. And lastly, but not the least, we have Dr. Cyril Siewe, the head of Kenya Country Office, Africa United Nations Environmental Program. This panel seated here has been very, very instrumental in shaping what is an EPR in Kenya. And just like you've seen, they have a lot of knowledge and information. Will allow us just to do like an elevator pitch. They just tell you a bit. If you want a lot, you can join us in the course of the Climate Summit, the Climate Week. We are here, and we will share our contacts. So for beginning this, to tell this story, I'll bring in Dr. Ayub and ask him, we are very proud of the Sustainable Waste Management Act. We enacted it in the year 2022. We had a lot of excitement. We had a lot of excitement on the act. So, Daktari, after the act, why is it important and what next?
Okay, thank you. As you heard, the Sustainable Waste Management Act became effective on 26th of July last year. And so we are busy implementing it. But you know that implementing an act requires several other tools. And so we have been busy developing some of the tools. One of them being the EPR regulation. Incidentally, since last year, the producers are supposed to have commenced implementation of the EPR, and that is why last week we demanded that they report on what they have been doing for the last 1 year. And so they are busy doing that. We give them the parameters, and they are busy doing that now. We are waiting 2 months, and then my people will be out inspecting and enforcing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daktari. He says he's given producers work. They are busy, and he's waiting for the time he'll call this. He'll bring the sticker. So let me bring in Camilla, and from Camilla, I'd love you just to tell us the role of Denmark in Kenya's transition to EPR, because I believe it's been a lot, but it's good to hear from the horse's mouth. A lot of the people seated here are alumni of the Danida program, including myself. So you can give us what that has meant both for Kenya and Denmark.
Thank you. Yes, so Denmark has a long history of collaborating with Kenya on environment and sustainable development. But since 2016, we've had this strategic sector cooperation on circular economy and environment, which is a direct collaboration between the Danish Environmental Protection Agency and the and NEMA, the National Environmental Management Authority here in Kenya. And so what Denmark offers as part of this partnership is technical support, knowledge exchange and peer-to-peer learning, and then we offer, as Faith was hinting at, scholarships and research grants through the Danida Fellowship Center. And it's nice to know that there are several alumni here. I believe that more than 1,000 Kenyans have participated in this, so I think it's been an important contribution to building this pool of green champions who have really played a significant role in shaping the sustainable waste management agenda and the wider green agenda here in Kenya. And specifically on EPR, we developed a 3-week intensive course on that, where 12 Kenyans from private sector and industry and government participated in February, and were able to exchange with colleagues from other parts of the world. And Denmark is also in the process of learning how to implement extended producer responsibility. So there's a lot of scope for exchanging knowledge on what works and what doesn't work. We are also still having some way to go. And I think maybe when my Danish brother Rune will speak later on, he can elaborate on maybe one of the advantages we have in Denmark is that we are able to measure and monitor our progress, and then that can help us to improve. But we are far from perfect. Thank you.
It's quite interesting to hear you make that confession, because when you have traveled, we have believed we have seen the best and gotten excited spending our lives in Denmark, but appreciated that I believe the best empowerment is knowledge. You empowered people who came with the knowledge. They did not replicate. They tried to create what works in the global south. And indeed, the alumni, all these are our alumni. Okay, so I bring in Kainika. And with Kainika being the Secretary General of the Kenya Association of Waste Recycler, I'd just like him to share what has all these changes meant for the recycling sector. Is it getting better? Do you see a hope, a future with the adoption of EPR in Kenya and the role of recyclers in it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Faith. I want to say that it has been a very good time for us. I think the recyclers, we celebrated the notice from NEMA, I believe more than most of the other stakeholders, because having been recyclers ourselves for many, many years, it is a fact that there was a gap. There was need, one, for more collaborative engagement with all stakeholders, particularly on the side of design. And the reason why I begin with the issue of design is because there is a need for people to agree on realistic approaches that would deliver what is intended. Because when we say recycling, it could mean very different things based on who is talking about recycling. From where the Kenyan recycler sits, I want to say that some of the ways and the means that have been applied have not been very easy, because the conventional recycling that is happening in Kenya is done by the people who are investing, and they use the means that they have, some of which are quite rudimentary. You'll find that most times in Kenya the equipment that are being used, especially in plastic processing, are made by the business people themselves. So you can imagine the level of leakage, the level of value extraction, and the resultant quality. So the reason why we celebrate EPL first of all is because we know that now, with bringing on board all the stakeholders, then the conversation is going to enrich the final product and the purity. And then there is the talk about the market, which has been a big problem. And the market, obviously, going back to the producers, is an assurance for us that we will not struggle when we process. We'll find buyers. And then, of course, there is the issue of capturing value in the waste immediately it is generated. That is also assuring us a bigger and a higher percentage of recovery of waste. So there are quite numerous advantages, and we celebrate this. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's nice to hear there's a celebration at the recyclers, and you want to join this celebration by having a hope that designs will be better, collection will be better, recycling rates will also be much better. But to be able to help us have this evidence of what is becoming better, I want to bring in Ron. He just tells us about the role of reporting in an EPR and automation, and if that is going to help us account for these changes using very good empirical evidence. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. I don't know if you can all see me. I can stand. Yeah, I should stand. Now it's on. Okay. Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Rune Lund. I work as regional manager for Cbrain, a Danish IT company. I'm based in Nairobi, where I live with my family. And we have specialized in fast-track digitization of organizations, including public organizations, over the last 20 years. And actually, 18 out of 21 Danish ministries use our platform, which is a one-in-all toolbox with email, chats, filing, archiving. It can handle freedom of information requests. It basically has everything in it that you need in a big organization, including a ministry or an agency. So we met Kepro. And then we have developed the digital platform called Keproms, the Kepro management system for Kepro, using our software. And it's, you know, there's a saying, I think it was Priyantana from Kepro who said that EPR is a three-legged stool. You need regulation, you need a PRO, and you actually also need digitization, because the EPR ecosystem is such a complex mechanism that you really have to digitize in order to manage it. Let me explain by just saying what the platform does for Kepro. So you need to apply for membership as a company and become a member. And also, and there's all the invoicing and all that, and in the end you will get a membership certificate. Next year you will need a renewal of that membership, where you will send out mails to hopefully thousands of members to renew their membership. But then there's, as a second thing, there's also the monthly EPR fees that you have to pay. If I'm a company, I have to self-declare, I have to report on a monthly basis my waste categories and my volumes, and fee will automatically be calculated by the platform, and I will have to pay that on a monthly basis. Every month I have to report. And I will also get a quarterly certificate showing that I have actually paid the last 3 months. because without that quarterly monthly certificate, that's stipulated in the regulation, if I don't have an active certificate, I cannot legally market products in Kenya. So, and then of course, so that's the, and then when the money goes, the EPRPs go to KEPRO, then again that money is being used to subsidize recyclers based on contracted volumes. So it's a very complex mechanism with all the invoicing, and that is all handled by the platform we have developed for KEPRO. And what is also very important in a platform like this is that we have transparency and accountability as a second part. So we need to be a full suite solution to support all the processes in KEPRO or in a PRO. Then it has to be, there has to be accountability and transparency. Basically, it has to be easy to be compliant, and it has to be very easy to identify the free riders, the joy riders. And the last thing, which was very important also for KEPRO, I'll make it shortly, was the data security. Because when companies submit information about packaging volumes, this is very sensitive business intelligence. So companies, members, and PROs have to be sure that their data is stored safely and in the right manner, so that there are no data leaks, for example. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about what is needed to run a PO like KEPRO. Yeah. It's a lot.
Let's clap for Rudy. I think he's given us the complexity of an EPR ecosystem and what it means in terms of just getting data about it. I want to bring in Dr. Sewe. Dr. Sewe sits here. He's a very big man. We all want to identify with him every time he comes from the United Environmental Program and in Kenya. And they've also done a lot of work in driving circularity globally. We've been speaking Kenya, but he has a global overview. So I'll give you 5 minutes just to give us what that looks like. Yes. Oh, you are, yes.
Thank you very much, Faith. Good evening, colleagues, friends. Great pleasure to be with you here. And you should organize, Faith, more, KESAP should organize more of such so that I can meet my brother from my other mother, Dr. Ayub. Initially, I was asked to just reflect a bit how since 2019, when the extended producer responsibility was adopted in Kenya, what has been the challenges and also the opportunity and the way forward. But I think maybe big people here, and through the example provided by Joyce and colleagues, and also colleagues from Denmark and now here, you can see the scope of the issues. So let me maybe jump straight on something else, but which is still relevant. For the first time, we can have, and Kenya was the first in Africa, by the way, to sign for the implementation of the EPR, which is, as I said, you bring together the consumer, the producer, and then the state, and they agree on what are the shared responsibility, who will be doing what. And in fact, it's an aggregation of all the work that we have been doing, environment education, awareness, raising, beating pollutions, etc. Beating pollution. So we are here today in this climate summit because of pollution, because of climate change, which is one of the crises, and because of the biodiversity losses. And we put everything together, and it produces what we are seeing, all the conversation that we're hearing here. So we are here at the climate summit, and then we are cascading down now in different issues that bring to that climate crisis. So how can the implementation of EPR be instrumental in Kenya? And let's jump again on some figure that Joseph mentioned. In 2019, only 10% of waste and plastic were recycled by the company. And less than 2 years after, now we have 25%. It means that it works. It doesn't go without challenges. But the other good news is that at the waste, we have now more plastic being recycled. When we start the journey, only 100,000 was recycling. And now we have more than 20 million. And you have seen from the numbers that Joyce has produced. It means that as a consumer, we can make pressure on the producer, as we also assume our own responsibility as a consumer, and we also make sure that the policy that has been adopted by the Ministry of Environment, by the state, it's well implemented, it's well monitored, evaluated, with all what it entails, transparency, security of data, etc. And that's why at the beginning you have seen that wonderful slide that Joyce had presented, that you have seen so many stakeholders, and I think you still have them on the other side. So looking forward, what could be our shared responsibility, our whole responsibility, which will at the end help us to also address the triple planetary crisis? Because when you're being told that if nothing is done by 2050, which is already tomorrow, less than one generation, we will have more plastic. We can say now we might, because plastic is now becoming conventions, it becoming mandatory, etc. We might have more plastic into the oceans than fish. Just reflect. I mean that the fish that we enjoy currently from either Lake Victoria or even the Indian Ocean, we may not have anymore if we don't undertake, if we are not part of this EPR, because all the responsibility are very well determined. And this is why Dr. Ayub can just assign the private sector and go and sleep, or at least go and do other thing and wait for 2 months. If nothing is happening, then you might have your license being withdrawn. So the second one is environment education, which is again something that we have been doing with Dr. Ayub. Sensitization, building awareness, working with communities, etc. And we're very lucky in Kenya that we have very vibrant community associations. We have a lot of NGOs, and people are really starting being conscious about their actions and how their action can really contribute to clean the city. Just a few years down from now, before 2017, when the ban was raised, you could see from the airport actually, even when you were having a tour at the park, you could see a lot of plastic single-use bags hanging here and there. And we can admit that today, the situation has really changed. And thanks to Professor Judy Wakungu, she was tough. And we can say that she was right to be tough. So it's with pleasure that the United Nations associate with the consumer, with the producer, through the partnership, through the policy, our engagement policy with private sector, to really foster the environment sustainability, because we don't have planet B, as our boss, the executive director used to say. So again, this is an ongoing conversation, and we look very much forward to continue this, and thank you for KEPSA for creating the platform.
Thank you so much. He was in charge of his time, which is very good. The only two things maybe I'd like to ask Dr. Ayub and Dr. Siwe. How do you see the Global Plastics Treaty in this whole maze? Will it catalyze what we are trying to achieve? Yeah, a comment or so.
Yeah, mine will be very short. If you allow me, colleagues here, I can wear my hat of a toxicologist. And what I can say is, you have heard about microbeads and beads, which is something that you cannot think about, is makeup. Makeup. Can you hear me? Makeup. That our wonderful women, sisters, wives, etc., put to please us or to please themselves. Well, makeup ended in the oceans as microbeads, and these come back to us in fish and different other aquatic resources. So this is what plastic become when we don't eliminate, when we don't phase out, when we don't put a barrier for them not to go into the oceans. So we have three solutions, and I will stop there. The first one is to be part of observing. Oh, it's a great, and we let them go in the environment, on the ground, water, ocean, etc. The second one is to start actions, which a lot of us have started, and thank to the major donor, because one of the Clean Seas campaigns is being funded by the Danish, the Norway, and so on. And the third one is EPR, which is us. The second solution, we can still rely on development partners and say, come and help us, because the magnitude is already too big. It's to phase out huge quantity, which is what we already have. So to answer straight your question, I think that the decision was tough. I will use the word again. But member state decided, and member state at the end is us. Now it's our responsibility to support our member state, for them now to bring the science back to the country, to bring the capacity back to the country, to bring the knowledge back to the country, so that as we implement those conventions, we implement them consciously. Because as you know, plastic It's almost everywhere. But it's easy to be phased out. But it's better that this is part of the agenda that will not defer to the future generation, to our kids. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and thank you for making it huge than localized solution. Allow me to invite Ebenezer, and I'd like him to engage the audience in 1 or 2 in 2 minutes, because you've listened a lot. We just pick two issues from the audience for response, and then we conclude the session.
Thank you so much, Faith. I was about to shove you a little bit to sit down because you're also taking my 2 minutes. My name is Ebenezer Amadi. I'm just running this session to invite any questions from the audience and allow the panelists to answer in 60 seconds. So I'll take 2 questions. Anyone happy to take the chance? So here's one. Any other person? Going once, going twice. Please give him the mic to answer the question, to ask the question.
So, good evening. I'm Sam Dindi from Mazigireti Organization. We do work with waste speakers in Kibra in a venture called Taka Nipato. And I'm wondering, in this whole scheme of the EPR, where will the waste speakers be? Because the waste speakers, we are the engine of making sure that zero plastics leaks to our environment. But in the whole discussions, waste speakers are usually left behind the scene. Like, for example, here, I was expecting a waste speaker to be represented here, at least to speak there, to share their input. But in the whole scheme, I'm not seeing where the waste speakers will be. So I hope they'll be considered.
Thank you so much for the question. I think if you look at the panel, you'll see a gentleman from my right, and you count, that's on your left, the third gentleman is called Kainika. He represents an association of waste speakers. And we also have a gentleman right there who also represents the waste speakers. So they are actually represented. I was tempted to throw this question to Dr. Ayub, but let me throw it to Kainika. Where are the waste speakers in this question?
Thank you very much. Sam Didi, hi. Yes, we do represent waste speakers, and for us we represent the entire value chain. We speak on behalf of people who are involved in waste management. We call them recyclers or waste management actors. If you go to our application form, you'll find that down there, the first person who fills the first drop down is a waste picker, but has 2 categories. It has to be either an individual waste picker or a private company as a waste picker or a group of CBOs. I think in this whole context of EPR and sustainable waste management, we are looking at waste pickers in the way of under the concept of just transition, where much as we are talking about no more to the landfill, but zero waste to as much waste to be converted as possible. We are also having a place for these people, and I know because I've engaged also with the PLOs that they have really considered the waste pickers. We have engaged with them. We've had sessions where we engage in terms of training them, connecting them to the marketplace. And more than that, is having a place for them during the time of transition. Because now we are moving from the dump site to the MRFs. We have that time of transition where we'll guide them to come together, to work together as groups, to begin to engage in a more systematic way.
Okay,
I think these can be discussed further and further and further, but we have them in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kainika. I was tempted to throw this question to the PROs, but ideally with the 2 minutes that we have gone overboard, what Kainika was trying to say is that the PROs will actually be working closely with the waste speakers at the county level, because looking at the infrastructure level. It's not really well defined, so they have to work with the West speakers and move along with them, as Kanika was saying, in terms of the transition. That's why I use the word transition. Of course, I know you're working with them as well in terms of training, so that's a good part of it. The end, that's the end. I've been shown a card saying the end. And this is a point where I ask the panelists to just stand up and move a little bit closer and get a photo, and then we'll be done with this. So I think that the tall people like me can move down there, I guess.
We took evidence at the SES.